Soul Hackers 2, because the first one came out before I was even born. I was a -2 when it released, but now I'm just in time to play the second one. Good news though, this game doesn't seem to be related to the past game in any capacity. At least, I didn't feel that there was any prior insight that I needed to understand the story or the world. So I'm just gonna get into it, because there's not a whole lot I have to discuss. Soul Hackers 2's story and world are both very small and limited in scope. The unnamed city and the areas you roam around in are set in a futuristic and cyberpop style. As described in the help sections, the game's atmosphere is depicted as an apathetic and unmotivated world. People have become reliant on technology and stagnation is commonplace due to complacency. Demons also seem to coexist with humans, however, they also seem to be equally seen as a threat, as only those identified as summoners are properly equipped to combat them. As such, human societal structure has changed in which there doesn't seem to be any type of law enforcement. Realms exist which are exclusive hidden pockets only accessible by summoners, and dangerous armed groups such as Yatagarasu and the Phantom Society have been fighting for a long time, making daily life even harder for citizens. As I described, there is quite some world building in Soul Hackers 2, however I feel that they didn't really elaborate or take advantage of their world in the story. There isn't any prior lore as to why the world has become hopeless, or how demons came to be. I also felt that the two factions of Yatagarasu and the Phantom Society were in the game to create conflict between Arrow and Milady. It was very rare that I found the groups themselves to be threats or even an opposition. I saw this as a negative because the game already doesn't have a very large cast of characters, so instead it's easy to perceive them as representatives for their faction rather as their own character. The story itself, though, is adequate. The theme that I interpreted was, to live is to face challenges in order to grow. I'll go into how that relates to our main cast later, but more importantly, the story felt that it was written around this theme, and because of this, a lot of the world elements couldn't be explored. I was hoping to learn more about the Kuzunoha clan and its reasons for maintaining peace, and I wanted more context on characters such as Paul and Gen Mayumi. Their motives could have been interesting, but they're never elaborated on. Most characters, unfortunately, besides the main cast, get this treatment. It's the choice the devs made, but it does pay out with how developed the main cast becomes from this. So about the characters, I really enjoyed that all 4 members have their own prior allegiances and priorities. None of them are really friends, nor are they partners, more so collaborators. This dynamic of dysfunctional tension but professional trust really made me enjoy the party's interactions and organicness of their personalities. Let's start with Ringo. To be honest, Ringo carried this game hard. It's rare for me to like the protagonist of a game as my favorite, but she really is a great character. Her design is also very unique with the flashing green diamonds on her jacket and that future pop aesthetic. As one of the 2 entities born from Ion, Ringo represents the emotional aspect of humans, classifying herself as a newborn. She learns a great deal from the rest of the party in how human life operates, and she witnesses how people struggle with their decisions and how they uphold their values. As expectingly omniscient I was to believing that both Ringo and Fig were, they were not. In the game's various hangouts and summoner skill dialogues, Ringo is constantly surprised at how humans differ from how they are researched. It was very enjoyable to witness her growth, and her carefree personality has really good chemistry with the party. As for Fig, first of all of her hangouts should have been available during the first playthrough. It really adds perspective as to why she makes her decision at the end of the game. Anyways, Fig represents the logic side of humans. Unlike Ringo, she is much more composed and caring to the party's needs and mental well-being. In truth, you learn that she does this for the sake of Ion's mission, but I came to understand that Fig's development throughout the story is different than Ringo because she held the Covenant. Upon meeting Raven for the first time at the orphanage, I finally realized that Fig was the first to realize his true identity. She didn't reveal it though, and that's why she had a conversation with him. It's crazy because I never thought that Fig really knew about Raven being Iron Mask all the way back then, but it's because of that chance meeting that Fig's development ended up being towards ending human conflict. Overall, Fig was most interesting to me as a foil contrast to Ringo's journey, and looking back on it, Fig was most likely suffering in silence about her conflicting motives during the entire game. Arrow is next, the Yaragarasu agent. Honestly, I thought he was the protagonist when I started up the game. He just has the look, okay? Arrow is a nice guy though. At the end of the game, he's the only party member that acknowledges Ringo and Fig, if she's still alive, as friends. His contrast with Kaburagi was very short, in fact, way too short, but I got what it was trying to portray. Both of them wanted a peaceful world, but they each had their own ways of going about it, to the point where they're willing to kill for it. Arrow definitely had the shortest personal arc until the Purple Covenant business, which is quite ridiculous. I know it's for plot purposes, but they really made Mangetsu a genius on the spot, having him invent 3 loopholes, creating a fake covenant, transferring a covenant, and sealing a covenant. It also had conventional amnesia, so that Arrow wouldn't even remember until we found his journal. Story development aside though, his interactions with Milady are hilarious as they are serious. They both will clearly have indifferences between them due to their factions, but it was really cool to glimpse into their futures in the Soul Matrix, seeing how the party members still keep in contact indirectly after the game's events. In regards to Milady, her entire life is the most tragic. Raven destroyed her hometown and killed her family, and Paul emotionally took advantage of a young Milady to further the Phantom Society's goals. As she matured, Milady doesn't seem to mind being used by Paul, and it's unfortunate but realistic that she was groomed and trained to be Phantom's top operative. Through most of the game, she makes her intent quite explicit and avoids familiarity around the party. She's quite apathetic to the results of the game's events, and it's not until the climax where she has a change of heart, realizing that everyone has their own conflicts and things can never be as what they once were. There's only accepting your past and making the future as you want. As for Milady's future vision, I'm not sure how to interpret it, but since both her and Arrow are still fighting for their factions, I can only infer that their purposes are more future-orientated, given Ringo and Fig's involvement in their lives. And lastly, there's Saizo, quite the mysterious character. He's self-aware that he's a coward and plays a dangerous but calculated game of being a freelancer in the summoner business. Similar to Milady, he's a covenant holder that was hunted down, and also similarly, it's not explained how he came to holding one either. Saizo's development with conflict is unlike Arrow or Milady though. Both of them have clear allegiances and values, but for Saizo, it's a matter of survival instinct and looking out for yourself. This is until he meets Ash and becomes conflicted with his own behavior. He attempts to persuade and run away with her, but it's naturally impossible given the lifestyle they live. Saizo is also the least story-bound attached character, whereas Arrow and Milady have larger stakes due to Mangetsu and Paul. Saizo's core motivator for sticking with the team is to save Ash from Phantom. His development was the most profound for me, since he's obviously lived a life with trust issues due to his freelance position, so relying on Ringo and the rest was a major change in his life. The main cast is the strongest strength of this game, as there aren't too many functions to talk about, nor is there any endgame. However, it is worth to note that most, if not all, side content is linked, making experiencing all the content and working towards completion symbiotic. For instance, progressing the story unlocks new requests, completing requests unlocks hangouts, and completing hangouts increases soul level, allowing you to progress deeper into the soul matrix to learn more about the main cast. As for combat, it's quite rudimentary, but uses similar terminology from other Atlas games. Despite being turn-based, combat is quite simple, in which you want to hit as many enemies' weaknesses every player turn, so you can annihilate them with stacks you gain from it. Other than that, the only strategies I ever needed to employ were with Ardha, which thankfully can be replayed after its first completion. Finally, before I end this, I want to quickly rant about the demon system. The Mitama and Frost fusion strategy is great for min-maxing your endgame lineup, but I did personally dislike the limitations of which skills each demon could inherit based on their affinity. This limitation does exist in other titles, however. Usually there are skill cards that function as exceptions. Soul Hackers 2 did not offer such a card system, and I think it would have been impactful for demon gifts to be skill cards after you receive their mystiques. It's like a rare gift you can farm out, but only if you put in the effort to max all the demons leading up to your final summon. And that's everything. In short, it's a very modest game with very modest offerings. It doesn't try to do anything unique, and it's a complete experience without any bugs or issues. I would say it's the definition of mid, but I think mid means bad these days. If anything, I'll remember the beautiful city areas, the Monsei Realm OST, and Ringo. But with another complete adventure, comes another beginning. It's time to leave these futuristic streets and head towards uncharted territory. God, that was such a terrible transition.